Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back. At this point in our program, we go around the room and introduce ourselves. It's by our first and or our last names. So I'll start. My name's David.
I'm George. I'm Robert. I'm Will. I'm Michael. Jack. I'm Jerry. I'm Peter. My name is Ray Geyer. My name is Todd Horn.
My name is Cage Lilia.
Hank. I'm Bruce.
My name is Clint Lassiter.
My name is Michael.
James.
I'm Peter.
My name is Glenn.
My name is Roy. Robert.
I'm Jeffrey.
I'm Jerry Martin. I'm Lane.
My name is John White. I'm Kevin.
My name is Zuriel.
Fred.
I'm Alex.
My name is Michael.
I'm Carl Wolf.
I'm Roger.
My name is Freddie.
Back row.
I'm Lee.
Joe Good.
My name is Joe.
I'm Will Brown. I'm visiting from the Mid-Valley Hong Kong in Mid-Valley, Hawaii.
I'm Richard Azzolini.
Conrad.
What's Walter? I'm Nathan.
I'm Brian.
I'm Jerry.
Marty.
Get everybody? Well, welcome once again. I'm very pleased this morning to welcome our speaker, my friend Anthony Rodgers. Anthony and I got to know each other. We did a 2-year dedicated practitioners program at Spur Rock together. We've just recently finished, so it's really great to have you this morning. Anthony did the dedicated practitioners program, and he currently volunteers weekly at the Zen Hospice project. We've had speakers from Zen Hospice in the past. He did the caregiver training last spring for Zen Hospice and says that it feels like his Sangha nowadays. He's also doing the Buddhist Chaplaincy Training program at the Sati Center in Redwood City, and has recently started a master's program towards a degree in Buddhist Studies at the Graduate Theological Union of Buddhist Studies. So, welcome, Anthony.
Yeah. So first off, I want to just give you permission to let me know if you can't hear me. I'm very good at mumbling, so if I begin to do that, please just raise your hand and let me know. And also, if if you feel like you need clarification for anything I say, please let me know as well. And I'm really actually very honored to be here. I was so happy to see David when I walked through the door. I have a lot of respect for him. And the way I'm going to lead this is I want to talk probably for only about 15 or 20 minutes and then have more of a discussion. My preferred way of leading groups is not as much to teach, to give my own ideas, but to present some ideas, some things maybe that I've been working with in my own practice, and then allow that to just open space for everyone else to share their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own questions, their own conflictions, whatever they happen to be. So that's how I'm going to go about this. And as far as being here and being honored to be here, From my own life story, I come from a very conservative Catholic family in Nashville, Tennessee. So to be sitting in front of a gay Buddhist fellowship is actually a little bit of a revolt, a rebellious act. And it hasn't been, as far as time-wise, it hasn't been that long of a journey, but it's been a very interesting journey. And I know for some specific members of my family, it would be a very important journey if they knew I was here. And I'll let some of them know. So I just want to present that it feels very meaningful, no matter what I say, for me to be a part of this Sangha today. So thank you for allowing me to share this space with you. So on that respect, all I could think about when I reflected about talking today was about Sangha. I was thinking about the meaning of this for me, and I just kept coming back to the importance of Sangha and about community. And I know when I first came to Buddhist practice, I closed my doors, turned the lights off, maybe had a book, maybe had a candle, and I went inside. And this form of practice lasted for a while, and only until the last few years have I realized that the most important area of my practice is community and relationship and being with others. It's led to me doing the volunteer training at Zen Hospice, which I do consider as my community these days, and doing the chaplaincy program, so having a Buddhist practice that directly engages other people on a continual basis. I've been very lucky recently to be able to sit with some very wise teachers and some very welcoming sanghas, and so this is up for me at the moment. I had the chance to go up to Abhayagiri, which is a couple hours north of here, which is a monastery, and had some interesting ideas of what I was going to do there. Had all these visions of a self-retreat, of silence, of quietness, and very quickly realized that a monastery can be a very busy place, and it can be a lot of work. The second day I was there, when 20 to 30 Thai people showed up with a buffet of great food, I was amazed at the lack of silence and in the community. All there to support certain people, and that's an interesting way of looking at it, but I quickly had to realize that it was supporting all of us, and it was supporting all of us there to help us to awaken, not just the monks, but also our capacities to serve, our capacities to do dishes, and just all of that. And so I had to let go of some of my self-preferences a couple of days into being there. I had to let go of some of my, maybe a very Buddhist way of saying it, my self-centered desire that leads to suffering. I had to let go of some of that and just let go into the community and realize that I was just adapting into a role. And if I let myself go a little bit and got into that role, I could lose myself in a very healthy way. Which leads this leads into this tricky question of losing ourselves or developing ourselves, which we all encounter in coming to a Buddhist practice. Of what parts of ourself do we need to nourish? What parts of ourself do we need to keep? What parts of ourself can we let go of? And maybe in the end, or closer to the end, is there a self at all? And I'm not going to go to that last question. But I wanted to bring up the idea of Sangha, how it can support our practice to reflect on these two things, of gaining a great or a healthier sense of ourself, and also allowing ourselves to see how that may be not completely necessary in a community that is supporting us. The healthy part may be necessary, but the unhealthy parts we may be able to let go of and just fall into the support of a community. So I couldn't help reflecting on this when I walked in here, and when we started to meditate, the room was almost overflowing. And it felt like a perfect chance for myself in my sitting practice to just let go of some of my self-preferences, some of my self-aggrandizement, you could say, and just feel the community. And so tying this a little bit to Buddhist ideas, I had a few classes this week. This week was the first week of classes at the Graduate Theological Union for me, and when we take classes in Buddhism there specifically, a lot of the students are from some of the other seminaries or the other institutes that are anything from Jewish to Catholic to Baptist, etc. And so the teachers often relay some modern ways of looking at Buddhist suttas and Buddhist teachings in order to relate it to this culture for the students who aren't that familiar with Buddhism. So at least 2, maybe 3 times this week I heard this relation of the story of the Kalama Sutta, which some people may be aware of. It's one of the main places where Westerners get the idea that we're supposed to figure this out for ourselves. And in a certain aspect that's true, and in each of the ways it was relayed by the teachers, they said, the Buddha taught that we're here, we're looking at this existence, the suffering, and we have to work on it kind of ourselves. And there's a certain part of that you can take as being very true. And in that sutta, there's 4 things actually mentioned as what we can use as aids. The first one is knowing if something is skillful. Another word that's used is wholesome, which has interesting connotations for me, so I tend to not use it. But skillfulness can be a good way of thinking about it for me. The second one is blamelessness, which also has some connotations. The third one is praised by the wise. And then the last one is, does it lead to welfare and to happiness? So the middle 2, the blamelessness and the praise by the wise, directly relate to our relations with other people. Whereas the first and the last one, we can somewhat do in isolation. I mean, is this skillful? Is this thought skillful? Is this thought pattern, is this mental habit leading to my own welfare, my own happiness? And so often, the middle 2 aren't often looked at. I mean, it can be very important for us to reflect on, is what we're doing actually looked upon by wise people as something that is fulfilling, leading to happiness? And for me, the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is directly related to the experience of Sangha. Also the words Kalyana Mitta, spiritual friends. So having a community of people around you who can represent, I guess you could say, a mirror or a space of honesty of, am I living in a way that is actually wise? Am I living in a way that leads to happiness and welfare, not just from my own perspective, but also for the perspective of those around me? And one of the classes I'm taking is actually the interface between Buddhist psychology and Western psychology. So whenever I sit in a room like this, I know that there are probably many people out there who are maybe possibly professionals in this field, and I'm not. So I want to put that out there first. But to understand the difference between the two is very important, because Western psychology can look at all the ways that our self needs to be whole. And Buddhist psychology can look at all the ways that the reality of a self is actually what's causing us suffering. So it's fascinating, these two, and then in our culture these two get tied together. In Eastern cultures they're less tied together. In Western cultures they're more tied together. And that of course is changing. An interesting story I just read in a book is in a Korean family, maybe the way of punishing a child may be to isolate them, to send them away, out of the house. Whereas often in Western culture, isolation is to keep them in the house, to keep them in the community, to ground them. Not ground them in a healthy way, so to speak, but ground them in community. It's like suffering. I know I had that experience when I was a kid. It was like the worst thing that would happen to me would be if I had to stay with my family. So I've had to work a lot, and I think it's a part of why I'm drawn to communities these days, is because I'm trying to find communities that allow for healthy intimacy, that allow for healthy relationships, allow for honesty, allow for my own vulnerability that I wasn't necessarily allowed to or encouraged to display as a child. And allowing that to be a support for me, for my practice, for a practice that may lead to an introspection of my self-worth, my self-value, and then also just the things that I believe to make up myself. Is everyone following this? Okay. So Sangha, so where this kind of hits rubber meets the road, I guess you could say. It's actually not so easy, because I know relationships are very complicated. It becomes very complicated very quick. In my own background, staying alone, part of the reason I did it was because it was so much easier. It was so much easier to stay in my own room and deal with my own mind than it was to include someone else's mind in that dialogue. And so I remind myself a lot of this these days, as I may, this morning, for example, may have been a lot easier to sleep in and to stay at home and practice for an hour or two, read and do my own thing. It was a lot more challenging for me to get dressed and then, for the last 2 hours, experience anxiety about facing dozens of people I've never met before. So this leads into how we engage with the things that stir us up, the things that cause suffering. And sometimes this will happen in community. Things will cause suffering. And not necessarily in a ultimate way, but in a very practical, right now, I'm not feeling happy, or I'm not feeling a state of well-being. And what I'm actually really curious about these days is trying to see how Sanghas can encourage this. How Sanghas can not only be refuges for well-being or peace, but Sanghas can actually be a place where someone can display agitation, display irritation, and so that it can become something that is worked with together. So this is combining the two ways a therapist may encourage you to display your anger, whereas a Buddhist teacher may encourage you not to display your anger. So these two things can start coming together, and it can become a very ripe area for us to look into some of the most inflammable areas of ourselves, the places where they can really come up powerfully. And do it in a way that may possibly be the safest container we have. And so I think that's all I want to say about the subject. So we have an abundance of time. So I really appreciate you listening to me and sharing these ideas about Sangha and how to look at it from the way I've been practicing with it. And I hope that this maybe can lead into an interesting conversation about this. And of course, I'm welcome to the conversation going in any other direction too, if that's up for other people. So thank you very much for your patience and attention.
Any questions or comments or feedback for Anthony?
I just had one, and that was the program that you're involved in. Is that a training program open to the public, or is it just one where you have to be at a certain academic level or whatever before they let you in?
It depends. Which one?
The one
are you talking about the master's program?
No, the one you said in Redwood City.
Redwood City.
You were heading up.
Yeah, the one I was involved in. I'm not leading it or heading it up, just to make that clarification. But it's a chaplaincy program. It's open to anyone. You have to apply. It actually is starting on Friday, so for this year it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a chaplaincy program that starts every fall. It's 11 months long.
Mm-hmm.
And it's open to anyone. You just have to apply and state your intentions for why you'd want to apply.
But is it Buddhist?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's this past year we had a Christian minister who was in it.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And so it's very accessible. And what happens in the West with chaplaincy is somewhat of a very Christian tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So Buddhist chaplaincy, there's not much of a history around it. So very quickly it molds into interfaith chaplaincy.
So it does have reminiscences of the other in it, the Western European.
It's possible, yeah.
Okay.
Since that's most of the culture we're dealing with. Yeah.
If I can add addendum to that, CPMC and UCSF also have chaplaincy programs that are paid, and they start in the fall as well, and it's open to anyone to apply.
I'm just curious. I'm sort of thinking about the last part of what you were talking about in regard to thinking of Sangha as its place. I'm kind of paraphrasing you, so if I'm not coming across clearly to you, please let me know. As places where people can allow their frustration to be shown, and also the Buddhist idea that you're thinking about right action, or you're thinking about right speech, and in a way those two seem kind of like, I don't know if opposed to each other is the right word, or sort of exclusive of each other. I'm wondering if you could give an example of a situation that you've been in personally where you've been frustrated and you've been in a group of people and you've felt safe in this situation with the group of people and you've been able to express your frustration, or something in your life that is that's sort of very sensitive to you has come to the surface in that situation, and how that has played out, and how you've either found that beneficial or destructive, or some of both, or neither. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the reason I said that about where the two can kind of combine and be a very right place is because the way I think about it, and this is my own ideas, is expressing our emotions or what's going on internally. Is a very wide spectrum. It's from completely repressing, nothing happening, nothing coming out, to extreme outward directed anger or sadness or whatever it is that is completely outward directed. For me, I tend towards the end of repression. So if I get angry, if I get triggered, I often will hold that back as being, and I'll have a lot of shame around it, maybe. And so I won't feel comfortable, I won't feel the space to actually bring it up, both internally and externally. It's not just, I don't want to blame it just on the circumstances around me. And I dealt with this a lot. This summer I took a class at the Baptist Seminary particularly on anger and conflict. And it was pretty fascinating. And it caused me to reflect a lot on my own experiences of anger and conflict. And that mostly they were lacking. They were all internal because I never actually felt able or safe or secure enough to express it. So a trivial example, because I don't feel like I've actually in a community, it's something I'm working very hard on at the moment, is to really honestly express my irritation and anger in a bigger community. The example I can think of is just in relationship. With my partner, in the middle of this week of taking this course, I of course had a lot of these ideas going around in my head, and I had a little bit of resentment about something that was happening in our home. And so I thought, I want to express this, kind of thinking about right speech and right action. And I started to talk about it. I felt very skillfully, and then the response I got back was, my projection. It was defensiveness, it was anger, it was not the response I wanted. I wanted the person to hear my desire, my expression of resentment, my expression of growing frustration, and to be completely empathic and hold that for me.
So what did you do when they weren't empathic towards you?
Oh, I shut down again. I mean, I went back to my kind of conditional reaction, which was very interesting, and it was a big learning experience for me. And it taught me a lot about how I express my own honesty with expectations for how it's going to be held. And it's interesting I say that after just, kind of setting up this ideal of having a community where we might have and be able to have an expectation that is held.
So in that example, did you, after you shut down, did you take time to reflect upon what you might have done otherwise?
Yeah.
And if you did, what were those reflections?
The reflections that I had, because I did actually for the class, I wrote a paper on this on the dynamic that took place, and the reflections led to me understanding that where I currently am and where I'm attempting to express my honesty is the only place I can be, and it's the best I can possibly do it. It's a very healthy thing for myself not to one of the things I was going to mention in this talk is sometimes this practice can lead to a desire to be kind of self-omnipotent. Like we can keep, if we keep practicing, we're going to become extremely powerful and almost controlling of ourselves and of our circumstances. And so that interaction led me to realize that I have very little control over the external circumstances, but I have a lot of control at times. And I wouldn't even say a lot, that's a jump. I do have some control over how I express it, the right speech, the right action, the right livelihood aspects, and being honest with myself. It's a challenge. It's where I am right now with my practice. So thank you for all your questions. Helped me to reflect on it. Yeah.
I'm just curious. You mentioned briefly that you come from a very conservative Catholic family in the southern state, but potentially qualifies as a southern state. The first Sangha that most of us enter into are our families, for better or for worse. And obviously, I don't know. All I know is what you said in the past few minutes, but it sounds like the path you're taking is very different from the path your family in Tennessee is on. I can very much relate to that because I had a similar experience with my family. And I wonder, in your experience, can you communicate in a way that's profound, or do they just think you're some kind of weird San Francisco person? I mean, basically, that's what the members of my family are very good people. They're very good, loving people, and their attitude towards me is loving in a way, but it's also kind of like I'm dismissed as a crazy liberal from San Francisco, and it doesn't go any deeper than that. And there's no desire I see on their part to do that, and so my relationship to them is I wish them well, but it's very superficial. It's very frustrating to visit them because I feel like kind of like some kind of harmless ghost. I mean, I hear all about the kids and the grandkids and schools and stuff, but they never ask questions about my personal life because it's too uncomfortable for them to do that. I'm just really curious how you handle that with your family, whether you have a communication with them that you think is significant, whether it's just kind of you visit them, you say nice things, and then you go.
So you're asking about my own experience with them?
Well, I mean, but asking about your own experience, taken to a larger context, as as how to deal with family or anybody in a way where there's no hostility, but there's just no understanding of what you're doing with your life and no interest in understanding that. Is there any way I just want to hear your experience about how you deal with that situation, if you do deal with that situation.
Yeah. The first thing that comes up for me is just acknowledging that I haven't had to deal with the isolation that a gay community has had to deal with. So I just want to acknowledge I don't want to talk as if my experience is more powerful or more telling than I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom about the same thing in this room. And, I have had to deal with it. I deal with it a lot. And it's interesting, the path. My dad was a Catholic deacon, so a lot of my path is actually quite similar to his. He's since passed away, and the most impactful statement that happened to me around my family was a couple years after I started practicing. My sister just made a comment that basically she thought I was a much better person. And for where my life was headed. To me, it was a huge compliment. I think for her, it was a little bit of just a remark just made in passing. But it gave me a little bit of a nudge of like, I'm. They're paying attention, at least, I think. I think my family, my experience is that they're paying attention more than I actually believe them to be. And they love them more than sometimes I take for granted they are. But it is very... I also have a mom who would love me no matter what I was doing. So I stay in very close contact with her. And that's kind of my route into the family. And then I just try to keep my judgments of my family as minimal as possible. I've said it very superficially at the beginning because I don't want to make blanket judgments about who they are. But just as a little bit of a background about where I'm from and how it provides meaning now.
And also, it's not my own personal life or your personal life, but this country is just so divisive. So at each other's throats, even within families or within these communities. It just seems like it's insurmountable. It seems like you never get to the point where you can have a meaningful conversation with somebody coming, in my case, from a very conservative background, where they're totally living that life.
Yeah. And it's challenging. Yeah.
My comments are really not really so much a question, but it's just some feelings about being here, and they are of gratitude. As I mentioned, I come from a very different part of the country, and the thought that initially came to mind was, well, I wanted to come here, I wanted to experience this. When I arrived, there were two people that I knew here. I lived in San Francisco up until 2 years ago, and I went to Hawaii to be with my partner, so that was a nice feeling. But when I sat here during the meditation, I thought, how different this group is from the Sangha that I'm a part of in Hawaii, which is by far the majority of Kama'aina Japanese, and a few Howle's white people with a Cherokee lesbian priest. So a little different. But as I sat here, the thought that came to me is that gives you an opportunity to look at the universality of Sangha and how it manifests in so many different ways. The feeling is quite the same. And you were talking about sort of your path. I had the opportunity, being active there after having become a member, and they have a member of the congregation each week be the master of ceremonies for the service. And because I'm a pediatrician, I wanted to be involved with Mother's Day and Baccalaureate, which combined. Well, as it worked out, they asked me to give a talk that day. And a couple of people said, well, tell us about your path. How in the world did you get here from a background of two Protestant grandfather ministers and two maternal uncles, and this path from the Bible Belt, Heartland, Hope Wasp community here? And so I told that story about it and emphasized or echoed what you said. I really didn't have much control over it at all. Followed the path and wound up there in Hawaii with a partner, openly gay in this community. I, would never have pictured that 10 or 15 years ago. The Sangha is a place where where we are very much accepted. We've had a couple of discussions on gay and lesbian issues and so forth, and I think it's really very progressive. It's, as I say, just reinforces to me the universality of what we can experience in Sangha no matter where we are. And I thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Yeah.
And I would just like to follow up on kind of the last two comments, and then especially Clint's. It just made me reflect that coming from a conservative, small-town Midwestern family that has a hard time understanding what I'm all about. I don't know which they find stranger, the fact that I'm Buddhist or the fact that I'm gay. Those are both just, they don't even talk about it. It's just too strange, But getting back to your gratitude point, that I have a gay Sangha and a Buddhist Sangha, and Sangha, at least it serves a lot of different functions, but this Sangha and other Sanghas I belong to serve the function of giving me the support of the community and the love and the acceptance that I'm not getting from my birth family, from my birth community. So I do feel some alienation and some sadness there, but I also feel a lot of gratitude for my Sanghas, my families.
Yes.
I was struck when you were talking about how you find that you tended to be more introspective and quiet, and other people tended to be more outward. And it occurs to me that I have two different types of sanghas, and one of them is a Buddhist sangha, and the other one is not. And one of them is the Billy Club, and that's the extroversion one, because there they have Heart Circle, where you, without comment by anybody else, simply talk about what's going on in your life. And it's an opportunity to talk about things that are happening, whether they're good or bad or whatever. And I see that as something that doesn't really happen in the Buddhist Sangha, and I sort of wish that it did in some way. I see the Buddhist Sangha as being very helpful. It allows you to meditate. It allows you to let go of belief and find other mechanisms in which you deal with situations. But it doesn't allow for emotional release. And I find that sort of interesting. You have any comment about that?
How could you, in your experience of a Buddhist Sangha, how could you imagine that happening?
Well, this is my own experience of a Buddhist Sangha. I've been here for around a year or so I'm not quite sure. I don't know why Buddhist Sanghas couldn't have heart circles as well. It might be helpful sometimes.
Yeah, I think there are attempts at it. I mean, I think there's also, and I just from what I've come to understand, I mean, it is making a progression from back when Buddhism first came here, when it was just all about sitting, and that was it. So there's a progression happening. I know I was actually at a Zen Hospice day long yesterday with an amazing teacher from the San Francisco Zen Center, and she, first half of the day was a lot of sitting and walking, but it was all about self-care. And I found myself at lunch wanting like more sitting and walking, and then we came back in the afternoon and we did no sitting and walking. We did a kind of co-creating a ritual, talking about the things that are our own obstructions in our hospice work. And then we co-created this ritual that we performed in about 20-30 minutes, and then came back and had a discussion for like an hour and a half, but there was no sitting and walking. And I remember the drive home yesterday complaining to the guy who gave me a ride that there was not enough sitting and walking. but also with this knowledge in my own mind that that's just what I prefer. That's my safety. And that the ritual was extremely powerful. And so there is a place for that kind of, and I'm making the bridge between what you just defined as a healing circle or a heart circle to a ritual. I think there is ritual opportunities in Buddhism that aren't necessarily taken advantage of sometimes because we are sitting. So there's definitely an outlet that's possible.
I was thinking about just part of what I love about the Dharma is being with things as they are, accepting things as they are. And I think in community or in Sangha, we've all internalized the dysfunction of our families, the dysfunction of the culture. So it seems unrealistic to expect that wouldn't be dramatized in our communities. And in a Buddhist Sangha, I think the possibility is that when those things get dramatized, that it's a call to awakening in some way. I'm thinking about, I think we've probably all heard stories about spiritual communities where even the wise person acted out in some way. And it's happened within this Sangha. I've been here long enough to, there have been people who have disappeared and hasn't necessarily been all that skillful, but we're human and we do the best we can. So I know when I started, being more of an adult person or moving into my adolescence and looking for community, I think what I was looking for was the family I didn't have. And I was always disappointed. And I think in some way, because of my own psychology, I compulsively created the situation where I was complicit with the situation where I created disappointment because of my expectation that people would be there 100% or whatever. So there's something so liberating about not expecting that, maybe holding a community to a value. You have shared values, and those values will hold you through the irritation, the frustration, the enactments, whatever they might be. But and it makes me feel hopeful about loving myself and loving other people, that I can just let them be fallible and not expect that they're going to be there for me in a certain way. I mean, I think it's a very unrealistic expectation, and maybe kind of a childlike expectation that we have. So that's just really up for me now. I'm feeling very kind of nourished by the existential confrontation of this is the way it is, and there's a lot of comfort in that, even though it's not how I thought it was going to be. You know, there's that letting go.
Yeah, you described very well what Sangha is as a way. The way I think of it as a place where you can drop some of yourself and losing your expectations or losing your preferences, and I guess the place that's bumping up with is that sense of a healthy self that some of us need, and self-expression, all of us need, and self-expression, and some place we can't help being an individual in this culture, because that's how we've been conditioned to be a very strong individual. So we all bring that here to this community that comes from a culture where the individual has not been conditioned to be as strong as in a Western culture. So there's an odd mixing there between a communal culture and an more individualized culture that happens in Buddhist Sanghas. And it's a very interesting place where these two things are bumping into each other. And we can either use it, or we can try to strive for either one of them, or we can try to merge the two a little bit. How are we on time?
We should probably wrap up the talk part, but will you be able to hang around for a while afterwards?
Yeah.
People want to introduce themselves?
Yeah.
For the social hour? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all very much.
Do we have announcements this morning?
Yeah.
Carl?
This was a very relevant talk for this Sangha now, because next week is our annual retreat, which is sold out, which is a big part of our deepening of connections and the Sangha. But I think even more important is the week after that is our all Sangha meeting here. So not next Sunday, but the Sunday after. And that only happens once every few years, I think, once every couple years, where some of the issues that people may have or ideas, like your suggestion, will be able to be aired in an open discussion to see where we want to see things change, if we do, or how we can deepen the Sangha. There's also going to be some appreciation of the people who have helped this Sangha continue to run for all these years, and a request for help in the various committees. So it's going to be very, very important. So I encourage everybody to mark your calendar for the week after next to be here, just furthering Anthony's discussion today of what is Sangha to us, and in reality, it's whatever we make it. And this is going to be our opportunity to make it. So, oh, and one more thing. December 13th is the annual LGBT retreat at Spirit Rock. So if anybody's interested in that, mark your calendar. Registration is now open. It's an amazing experience. Many of us over the years have been to it. It's a 6-night silent Vipassana retreat, LGBT, with 3 wonderful openly gay teachers, Larry Yang, Arena Weissman, and Anushka Fernandopoul, who have all been here over the years. And it sold out last year, 85 participants. So spiritrock.org is the website, and it's a sliding scale, and it is amazing for anyone who has not even been to Spirit Rock, the land itself, and the experience is transformative. So December 13th through 19th.
Thank you, Carl. Jerry?
Yes, hi. Anthony, thank you for coming to speak today.
Thank you.
Next week, our speaker is Susan Moon. You guys probably know from Spirit Rock.
Yes, one of our Sangha members, Harvey Whitten, is still at St. Francis, and I dropped by to see him the other day. He didn't know me, but I didn't know him that well. But he is in good shape, and his friend from Philadelphia is here, and it seems like he's going to be going back to Philadelphia. He's going to take him back. And one of the reasons Harvey came was to be at the retreat this weekend, which he's not going to be able to do. And Bob, his friend, said, during the week it's quite busy, and he's staying through tomorrow, just so, he'll be around for the weekend. And if any of you have any time that would feel inclined to go down, I think he would appreciate it, later on today.
Say where he is.
Oh, it's at St. Francis, and it's in it's on the 7th floor. It's what do you call it, recuperation. So he wasn't physically impaired or anything, but he looked quite good, actually.
I was just taking stock of time this morning, and I realized that this is my first anniversary of coming to GBF, and I just wanted to acknowledge that, and it's been both fun and eventful.
So just to follow up on that, I saw Harv, who's a friend from here, and whom I have some common contacts in Philadelphia yesterday, and he seemed to be doing fairly well, a little confused, and I was struck by how cheerful and accepting an attitude he had. It occurred to me that it was very consistent, at least with his Buddhist practice. So I wanted to share that. And it's at St. Francis Hospital at Bush and Hyde is the place. And I suspect he could be visited during the week also. I went yesterday. And the other connected thing is, and really sort of to the Sangha stuff, I had actually offered Harv a ride down to the, one way, down to the retreat, because I'm going to Southern California from there, so I can't share a ride. So, of course, he can't do that. So if anybody would like to go in late morning, if you already have a ride coming back, but maybe you'd like to go earlier, I would be pleased to have company at 11 or 12 or so. So I'll be around for a few minutes here and talk to me.
Do I see a host out there?
Yes, I'm your host. There's some snacks. Maybe some of it's not too healthy, but followed up with maybe some watermelon and wash it down. I'll be coming around with the Dana bowl, so it can be compassionately generous. Wonderful. To your right as you leave, there's a sign-up sheet, so if you wanted to hear about things that are going on in our newsletter, please sign up with your email address. And if you help yourself with tea, could you please rinse out your cup? There's some hot soapy water.
Thank you for hosting. Let's gather in a circle and offer merit. Well, as we stand in this circle, this is our Sangha, whether it's our first time or whether we've been here for a year, or some of us have been here for many years. Let's just look around for very short moment and appreciate the Sangha as it's come together today in its own unique way. And when we do so, in their own minds and hearts, let's offer up the merit of our practice this morning in this rich discussion to all the other Buddhist Sanghas everywhere, and all the other Sanghas of different religions, different groups. May all beings have at least one Sangha. May all beings take comfort and support from their Sangha. May all beings be happy and free.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.